It's great to have our guest speaker here today, and our guest speaker is Steve Biddulph. Steve, in fact, I first met Steve, he wouldn't know this, but I first met Steve when he was speaking at the Sydney Adventist Hospital. And this was most probably 20 years ago when I first met him. It was actually soon after I'd come to the country. And I was told by a work colleague, oh, you have to go and see this guy if you want to know anything about parenting, because I was just in the midst of we were about to have our first child. And he said, you need to go and see this particular man. And I went to tell the truth, I was very skeptical when I went, because I thought, goodness me, I'm young, I'm intelligent, I know everything that there is to know about everything. What do I need to actually have some guru tell me? And boy, was I wrong. It was great to actually come and realize that, in fact, that arrogance was very much misplaced. But instead, what it was just a fun, informative, connected opportunity to talk about both what it meant to be a father for my wife, what it would mean to be a mother, and then certainly what we were looking forward to in terms of parenthood. And so it was a great way to actually introduce myself to Steve, and I've followed his writings and read his writings since then, including using, Steve, your books, The Secret of Happy Children. We actually used that as the template for our own children, and
wow.
and yeah, I think they've turned out okay. So that's I could say thank you to that. Thank you to you for that in terms of some of that process too. So it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for being prepared to be the guinea pig, the first one to start with our first service. So thank you very much for coming.
It's wonderful that we go back so far, Martin. I had no idea, and it's a joy to be talking to everyone there that's participating in this new program. So hi to everyone, and thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now, obviously, the idea of this service is really to talk about the fact that in terms of where faith is and spirituality is that your books have a particular connection with that. And I've got the New Manhood, which is one of your newest books, is dealing. There's a whole chapter at the end of the book on spirituality and on the spirit, and the importance of that within the life of the new manhood, the life of parenthood in general. And so I'd just like you to kind of give us a sense of how do you see that connection between spirituality and life?
Okay, these are big, fantastic questions. And I was thinking about this, that people should understand that Martin sent me the questions so I had a chance to look like I was intelligent when the time came. And I was thinking about this, and I thought, this thing happens when you sit down to be interviewed, people watch you being interviewed, this kind of goblin of self-importance settles on your shoulders, and you can easily get thinking, oh, I'm sensible and organized, and I've thought through my life, or hard work has got me where I am today, or even with being a psychologist, we psychologists understand the human mind, and so we can guide people to better lives. And I just want to say at the outset, that's just absolute nonsense. And what spirituality, as best as I can figure it out, does is you look at your life and you realize none of that is true. But if I look at my life, Martin, and anyone who's listening, I'm sure it's the same. We've staggered blindly through random events. We've been pulled back from the brink of terrible blunders many times, or sometimes in good ways, carried on great winds across the sky. But it's so much a feeling of blundering along and larger forces helping us make something of it as we go. And that life is a very ragged and disheveled business, and meek and messy. And we work to try and tidy it up, and we try and cultivate, the garden of our family and ourselves. But we're always going to be muddy and have unmatching socks. It's just the way it is. And so spirituality is just learning to live with that, and somehow to not be frightened by that fact. And the two things that I seem to be able to be okay at in my life, I'm very much a learner parent, and I'm a learner husband and things like that. But somehow or other, I discovered that I could walk in front of an audience of 1,000 people, and something happened. And even before I before I got started, even this feeling would come into the room. And the other one was that sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night with a book in my head, and so the only word you could possibly apply to that is grace. And that sometimes you can just step into this place where things seem to flow right, and you seem to be getting used in a good way. And so to me, that's the way that spirituality has worked in my life is this kind of, that you do have to step up, but it isn't you. And Martin, I was looking for a picture of it to try and make sense of this. And there's a thing that human beings do when they're frightened. We pull our heads in, and we hunch our shoulders up. And I'm sure everyone listening and watching you notice if you're a bit tense, your shoulders come up, and there's a loud bang. That's what happens. And it turns out the reason for that is we humans had predators for millions of years. Our ancestors had predators, mostly large cats, who would jump on you and they would go for the throat. And so we developed a reflex to guard our neck, and so that the saber-toothed tiger might get a mouthful of shoulder or something, and our friends would, our clan would have to be time to spear them or something. But all human beings tend to pull our heads in, and so I thought about what the way we want to live and the way that spirituality can help us live is. If you think of Jesus as an example, it's because I'm a Christian, that's my example, but I don't put anything special on that. But what Jesus did was he stuck his neck out, and
he exposed his throat.
Yeah, he knew what he was walking into, yep. And he just decided, this is what I'm going to do, and hope that I'll be able to be carried through it. And so to me, spirituality takes away the self, it takes away fear, and you can kind of start to walk with your head up, and say, use me, this situation, use me as best you can. How can I be of use? And how much joy that can bring. And so that's a bit of a ramble, Martin. I better wind it up there, but that's what the thoughts that came into my head from that.
No, I think for me, there's a couple of things I'd like to tease out from that. I suppose the one is that you're not using any religious language there, and I suspect that you're doing that on purpose.
Martin, the best way I can put this, I have a very simple mind, and I'm actually working at the moment on a book about our minds and how our minds work, with spirituality as part of that. And it's as if the way our brain is layered, and the bottom layer is to do with the body and the body wisdom, and the next layer up is to do with the emotions that are kind of thumping around inside us, and that builds on top of the body. And then on top of the emotions is our neocortex, which is our thinking part of our brain. And so in a way, our mind is like a big 4-story mansion, and we can move between the rooms of that mansion. Now, if you're on the 3rd floor in your thinking mind, it's like you're looking around this floor, and there's a manhole in the ceiling. And there's even maybe some cracks of light coming down around this manhole. And so after a while, you say, I wonder what's up there. You've noticed it for 20 years, but you never got round to it. And so you go and get a ladder, and you climb the ladder, and you push on this manhole cover. And suddenly it opens, and this bright sunlight shafts down, and you hop up through the hole. And there's this amazing roof garden on your top of your house. And you go up and you can see the stars, you can see the clouds and the trees and this vast landscape all around you. And you suddenly realize your house is a little part of this wide open space. And so what that does then is it suddenly expands things, and you now have a perspective on all the little stuff down below. It's necessary to think, it's necessary to feel, it's necessary to listen to your body. But it's in perspective now. And so it's a way of kind of saying, if you're having to, what I'm doing, because I'm just learning this, my life is often quite hard. We have health challenges in our family. I'm quite worried about the world, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. I'm a naturally stressed kind of physiology. I just have to get up to the roof garden as often as I can. And the things that people watching would do to get onto their roof garden, so that they can feel part of the vastness around us, that it's a beautiful and an eternal vastness, and doesn't even matter what happens to you as an individual, really. It's all going to go on, but maybe you can play a little part in it. That's my simple-minded man's view of where spirit fits in the human self. And I'm glad you're nodding your head and not going cross-eyed with.
No. I love the image. I mean, in fact, I think that's the whole reason for us setting up this service, is to actually give people access to the manhole. Essentially, that's the whole point of this, is because for so many people, the institutional space of religion isn't a place which is a garden. And I love the way they use the word garden, because, of course, the word garden in Arabic is paradise. And so for me, there's a wonderful connection with that in fact Christ talks about us spending time in the garden, in paradise, that place which gives us perspective for the rest of our lives. Yes. So I love the image that you created there, and I think, and as I say, I think that's the one that we're wanting to encourage and to connect for people, is that understanding as well. You belong to a uniting church in Launceston, and with what you've just said now is in many ways not churchy, or people's understanding of church. Do you feel that there actually is still a future for churchy, or is in fact church needing to adapt to a more garden-centered perspective of spirituality?
Now, I kind of, when you ask that, I feel this kind of like I wouldn't venture to say what should happen. I think you
wouldn't want to presume.
Presume, that's the word. Yes. It's but I think there's a wonderful evolution happening quite quickly now. But if I look back to I was a troubled teenager, at-risk teenager, and what happened was that people mixed. My parents were in the church, and people mixed up in the church were doing some things then, like coffee shops for street kids, things like that, and I got basically saved from things going badly in my life, and people seemed to do things behind the scenes. I was invited to live in a share house with some other young people, and I got to go on some camps where, and it wasn't that I was treated as a problem. I got to go on camps where they had a job for me to do and had a use for me. But the primary ingredient was there were people who were not my parents, who were adults of various ages, who to me seemed pretty cool adults. But the best thing was that they paid a lot of attention to me and asked me questions to things I never thought about before. They weren't recruiting, they weren't evangelizing. They were interested in my life going well. And so I think, youth is in this culture, youth is a very fraught space. I'm getting emails from people all over the country with communities where suicides are happening, in little explosions of suicides in country towns, and it's the coroner has said that there isn't, it's no greater now than it was before the virus, so it's not that, It's just that adolescence is very dangerous a time in this culture. And the reason it's dangerous is we don't bear up the young people through that time. The parents fall in, naturally and appropriately, parents fall back at that time. But nobody comes inside to carry that young person across the threshold. And so church is a community, and it has many ages involved, and it has some steadiness to it. And that's what young people need. And so I think it should be our major focus is transitioning young people into a spiritual change. The core understanding of being an adult is that we're not here for ourselves. That life is supposed to be enjoyable and beautiful, but it'll have a good deal of grief and pain. But it'll go better if we're here for each other. And so when we initiate young people into adulthood, Richard Rohr has written loads about this. There's a very clear message that it's going to be hard, but you're not on your own. What a spiritual tradition says is not only you're not on your own, but none of us are on our own. We're held in something huge. And so church people are supposed to have a handle on that and know that, and then be operationalizing that back into the world, so that everyone in the community sees that church is doing radical stuff in the world. And if you want to be a part of radical stuff, you should probably go along there.
That's
so
right.
Leadership, yeah.
Thanks, Steve. We're gonna take a break, and we're actually gonna listen to some music, and hopefully the music will be both inspirational and encouraging and connected for us. And we'll come back and meet again, and just finish off with some of the things that Steve's been doing on an activist level. So let's listen to the music together. Well, welcome back, Steve. It's great to continue to talk to you, and thank you very much for what you've already shared with us. I think it's been both insightful and important for us. I want to highlight just two things that where I know that you've retired to some from your private practice, and in fact pulled back on some of your talking as well, in order to continue writing and but also doing some activist work. And in doing some research for this interview, I found out that you're part of an organization called the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change. Can you give us just a short précis about what that's about?
Yes, now this is a Sydney-based organisation, although it's Australia-wide, and its most defining characteristic, it's an interfaith group. And so it's Christian, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, and everything else. And it's saying that, okay, the job of people of faith is to be an answer to the questions of our time. And so there's no doubt human survival is the question of our time. And so they're doing very militant and yet very peaceful work, because it's just talking strategically and tactically, if you like. Governments kind of like to have religion in their pocket. They like to wear respectable suits and ties and give this impression of being respectable people. And as we're clearly seeing, often they're just not. Trump isn't an aberration. He's just a stunning example of what's happened in leadership in our world. And so groups like Australian Religious Response to Climate Change are saying Christians are not tame, and they're not going to watch passively while the next generation loses its chance of living. There are, I think there's 8 billion people alive today, but should climate change go the way it's going, the Earth will only carry 1 billion people by 2100. And so you just need to do the arithmetic as to what the next century is going to be like if we're going to get down to only 1 billion people. That's a terrible future. And anyone that you talk to about their view of the economy, the world, of where politics should go, ask them, what's the carrying capacity of the Earth in your future? And because that's the most fundamental question that there is. And so joining up the faiths is also an incredibly superb thing to do, because we've always been divided. You know that famous joke about the Scotsman, I think it was, who was shipwrecked, and when they rescued him, he built 2 churches out of pine. You know the story. I'm sure every minister knows this. They said, "Why did you build 2 churches on your, on your desert island?" And he says, "Oh, it's one that I go to, and one that I avoid on principle." and so it's this terrible proneness we have to mistake spirituality for some kind of argument on the details, and we have enough trouble within Christianity, but we can't afford that anymore. We have to unite with everyone who has a religion is an attempt to humanize the domination systems of history. The Roman Empire was a terrible oppression system, but every system tends that way. And religions seem to spring up as a way to channel the hearts of people to fight oppression. And so it has to be a place where we do get comforted and feel nurtured and safe. But as soon as we get that, then the feeling comes in. And there were ministers in our church who, every time you walked out, you felt your courage had come back, that you were even approximately on the right track doing these very radical things of refugee activism and so on. And as I said, I'm timid and I'm nervous, and I just want people to like me. That's my whole, tendency. But the times are calling for something different to that, and I couldn't do a thing without that kind of underpinning being there.
I want to finish today with something which I found out by accident, which was, I knew about it, but I didn't know where it was. And this is the memorial that you were involved in from 2003 for the Civex, the refugee ship that sunk just off the coast of Indonesia. With, I think it was 343 people died. I actually was just driving around Canberra. I was waiting for my wife, and I happened to get into the park, and I didn't really know where I was going in many ways, and I saw it was there, and I thought, oh, I need to go and have a look. And I was really overwhelmed by it. You've got there's a mock-up of the size of the boat itself, which was only 19.5 meters long, and to think that there were 421 people on board. It's hard to even imagine that many people on a boat that size.
Yes.
But then to actually look around at each of the poles and see the artwork that was done. So I was very, very moved by the memorial. And in fact, I want to encourage people to go and have a look at it. It's at Western Park on the lake, on the shore of Lake Burley Griffin. And so if they've never been, to actually go. What was the motivator for you in terms of doing that? You live in Tasmania. It happened outside of Indonesia. And to set it up in Canberra. What was the motivator for you?
Martin, basically, I think what it was that my whole life's work has been around parents and little children, especially as a man, I feel this protectiveness towards mothers and little children. And this vessel was almost entirely full of mums and kids. The reason for that was their husbands had already come to Australia. It's normal in Middle Eastern refugees, the men go ahead to make sure everything's safe. And we'd locked them down under our changed visa system, and we wouldn't allow them to reunite. And so this vessel was full of mums and kids trying to join their husbands. And the fact that 350 people died, that's like a jumbo jet going into the ocean. But what I felt at the time, if that had been a jumbo jet full of Westerners, of well-off Westerners, the memorials, the grief, the investigations would have been planetary for that. Mm. Whereas this was a one-day headline and was gone. And I just couldn't sit with that. And together with the minister, Rod Horsfield at our United Church in Launceston, we talked it through and thought we want to do something about that. And we ended up with what you saw on the lakeshore, 400 meters of wooden poles tall poles for the adults and little poles for the children, so that you could see what that number, 353, what that looks like in human beings, and walk amongst them and read that. And sometimes you'll have a dad, often the doctor. The three men who were on that boat were doctors, interestingly enough. A man, his wife, and 5 or 6 children, all dead in the water. And the reason we don't have the names is because the Australian Federal Police do have the names. They have the complete manifest. And we've campaigned for 10 years to have those names released. And we won't stop until we have all those names. And so we don't understand the reasons why they won't release them. But that would be the final completion of that memorial. But you're right, in the Middle East, that memorial is very well known. And the message it says is that very many Australians don't live out of fear. We're not the selfish people on the edge of the earth. We welcomed the spirits of your families here. We built this for you, and we're deeply sorry for what took place and any part we played in that. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit upset talking about it even now, but
sure.
that was what that was all about. And yes, please, if you're watching, look at the website. There's beautiful film footage of the events held there. We'll have the 10th anniversary of that next year in Canberra, of it being built. 20th anniversary of the sinking. Yeah, so glad.
We'll make sure we put the website as well in the chat, so that people can go and have a look at the website and particularly go to the place, because it is the most beautiful park.
Yeah.
And it's such an unexpected memorial in that space. It's a wonderful. I never realized that CivX actually wasn't the name of the boat. I always assumed it was the name of the boat, but in fact it was the name that was given to the boat by the government.
Yes. It's every vessel was given it's suspected illegal entry vessel.
That's right. So it didn't actually even have the name as such.
Well, not that we know of. No, and no. X just means it's the unknown. It's the unknown one. Yeah.
And in some ways, because of that, it actually it becomes then a memorial not only to that one boat, but to all the unknowns that have died trying to get to this country, and in fact the refugee reality globally.
Yes.
And I think what you've given us is some more tools to help us not just survive this life, but to live it. And to live it maybe by opening up that manhole and into a garden, which can give perspective to the rest of our lives as well. So thank you very much for giving up your time and for spending it with us.
You're very welcome. See you later, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the service. Thank you.
God bless. As we come to continue to think through what we've heard, and we give thanks for Steve, and we give thanks for his connections and some of the thoughts that he's shared with us. I want to close off our time together with sharing 2 little thoughts from myself. The first one comes from the Bible. It comes from the New Testament, and Jesus often used parables or stories. And I want to share one of the stories with you, and then I want to share a story from another book as well. He says he told them another parable. This is in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 13. It says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches." It's an interesting story because, of course, the problem is that nobody actually in the Middle East plants mustard seed. Mustard seed attracts birds, and if you're anything of a farmer, you know that you don't want to attract the birds. You actually want to repel them. You have scarecrows and things to do that. So why would you ever want to actually sow something that will attract birds? Well, the reason for it is because, in fact, spirituality is different to our world. In our world, it's all about me. But as Steve was talking about, is that the whole point of spirituality is about how I can be of use in the world. How, in fact, love can triumph over hate. How kindness can triumph over greed, which you'll see in a sign just now. I found a lovely little story, a little parable in a book by a guy called Anthony de Mello called Taking Flight. And it says the following. It says, "A woman dreamed she walked into a brand new shop in the marketplace, and to her surprise, found God behind the counter. "What do you sell here?" she asked. "Everything your heart desires," said God. Hardly daring to believe what she was hearing, the woman decided to ask for the best things a human being could wish for. "I want peace of mind, and love, and happiness, and wisdom, and freedom from fear," she said. And then as an afterthought, she added, "Not just for me, for everyone on earth." God smiled. "I think you've got me wrong, my dear," he said. "We don't sell fruits here, only seeds." See, I think that in the end, for me, when it comes to the concept of spirituality, the one thing that I loved about what Steve was saying was about the garden. And in the garden, we sow the seed, and then we watch that seed grow into a flower, into a plant, into a tree, into whatever it is that can bear fruit. For me, if spirituality is really to be true, it's something that we can connect with, then real spirituality is not about buildings or about dogmas or about denominations. In fact, real spirituality is about how we walk in the garden with God. We allow Christ to change our lives so that we in turn can actually be and make a difference in the world together. We're going to spend a short moment now, just in a reflection, in a, maybe call it a meditation. I'm going to show you some photos of that Civex memorial in Canberra. And as we read the memorial stone, as we think, as we see each of those poles, what I'd like you to think about is how this week, maybe this coming week, this coming month, the ways in which we can actually turn seeds into fruit, the ways in which we can connect in spirituality with God, and that spirituality can change the way in which we connect in our world. I want to encourage you, as I encourage myself, to hear what Steve was talking about, and to say, how is it that we can make a difference within the world? Knowing that, in fact, the energy, the sunshine that actually energizes our life is the one that's through that trapdoor, up into the garden where we can walk with God. So let's spend a short time in reflection now. It's great. I pray that as we thought through that, as we had a chance to meditate, to think through what we can do, I pray that you may come up with a thought in your head about what maybe we can put that spirituality into practice. For spirituality that's not put into practice, then actually is just something that's for ourselves rather than for God. I pray that instead we may seek to put that spirituality into practice in whatever we do this week. That we may find that manhole, that trapdoor, and we may find ourselves in the garden this week, where we may find some energy and encouragement and connection. And so as we close, as we go each to our own places, as we go each to what we're going to be doing this week, I pray that for each of us, we may find the garden. We may find that place where we may walk with the Lord, that we may be in that place. And that being in that place may energize us, inspire us, and encourage us to go out and to live out spirituality, to go and live out that which we are called to do. I'm going to leave with a blessing, and the blessing is this. May the Father's hand keep you from stumbling. The footsteps of Jesus give you confidence to follow. And the fire of the Spirit keep you warm and safe in your walk with God this day and in the days to come. Have a great night and good night.